everybody. I hope you're well. I hear that this week we are looking at generosity, and I just wanted to share a few of my reflections on generosity, particularly from what I've seen in action here during COVID. We've had a lot of volunteers at the beginning of lockdown wanting to help those most vulnerable in our community. As you can see from the photos, we have a lot of people in our community who are shielding, who are over 70, who have diabetes or other health complaints that mean that they are extra vulnerable to COVID. And on the other hand, we had lots of volunteers who wanted to help. So the first thing we did was we saw the need of these people in the photos, and then we thought, what can we give, and what do they need? And we ended up thinking what they need is they need company. So we decided that to pair one volunteer up with one community member, and that volunteer would commit to phoning them every few days and also to doing their shopping for them so that they would be safe and they wouldn't have to go out and they'd have enough food. So that's what we did. We did the shopping, as you can see from these photos of our community members receiving their shopping and having their shopping done for them. But there was 4 things that really stood out for me during this time about the generosity I witnessed from these volunteers, and actually also from among the community members. And these 4 things, I separated them into 4 areas, but they do overlap. The first thing about the generosity I saw was the generosity of time, and then the generosity of words, the generosity of skills, and the generosity of gifts. So I thought we could look at those 4 things during this assembly. And the first is, if I turn it round, time. The generosity of time. Lots of the older people, they were really lonely and they had so much time on their hands. And unlike us, I think a number of us probably have spent time on the internet. We've got maybe Netflix and Amazon Prime, and we're able to fill our time in a way that is it's quite mixed and it's quite refreshing. But for a lot of the older folk in our community, they didn't have those options. So actually the giving of time in the phone calls was a real blessing. The regular phone calls every few days, the way the volunteers gave their time generously made a real difference. Also the giving of time in the shopping, because as you may have been to the shops recently, and it's not just easy walk in, walk out. It takes a lot more time, and the generosity of giving that time over to do someone's shopping made a big difference to people. So when we think about being generous, one of the things we can think about is how we use our time. It might be that you give a bit more of your time to reading to your siblings. It might be that you give a bit more of your time to listen to your parents or your siblings or your friends. It might be that you give a little bit more time to help out on the very little things, the little chores that maybe you find a little bit annoying and they take time and you want to rush them. But just being a bit more generous with our time means that someone else gets a little bit more time for themselves. And the second one is a generosity with words. Ooh, is that the right way up? Yeah. Words. These might be back to front, by the way. I still don't know how to work my phone really. So again, with the phone calls, as you can see, a lot of the older people and their volunteers, they got really close, and the volunteers were so generous with their words. They were so kind. And for example, this picture of Alan, he's such a lovely man. He used to be an actor, and his volunteer is Amy, and she works for a really big paper. She's a journalist, and their conversations are so rich, and they use their words to build each other up, and their phone calls are really uplifting. And I deliver shopping to him on a Sunday, and he often recalls to me and recounts to me the things that she said to him, the really encouraging things she said to him. So when we think about being generous, often it can be just what the words we use, how we encourage one another, how we build each other up. It might be if we're on social media, what we post, what we say. A number of our volunteers wrote cards, like, for example, like these ones, just little cards, and they wrote lovely words inside them and sent them to their community members. And those words had a lot of power. They had a power to build them up when they were feeling low. And then thirdly, what we can be generous with is our, again, this is probably back to front, our skills. So we're all made differently, and we're all made with specific skills. You may think that what you can do isn't a big deal, but actually lots of people can't do what you can do. Be it play the guitar, I definitely can't do that. Be it speak another language, be it even be good at maths. You might be good at science, you might be good at art. There are so many different ways in which we are skilled, and we might not even be aware of it. And in this time, I saw how people were generous with their skills. For example, this is Ron, stood outside his garden, and he loved his garden before lockdown. But during lockdown, he has got diabetes and a number of really complex health complaints, and he couldn't get out. Do you know what his volunteer did? She's a very skilled gardener. She went early in the morning before he was up, and she snuck into his garden, and she did all of his gardening without him asking. And for me, that is being so generous with your skills. Because, I mean, if I'd gone into his garden, it would have been a disaster, because I am completely unskilled in gardening. I'd have killed everything. But because she had a skill at gardening, she was able to be generous with that skill. And he was his face when he woke up and saw the garden transformed, it really, really lifted him. And he started sitting out there, because he said to her before, I don't want to sit out there because I feel so depressed looking at my garden and looking at it going to ruin. Another skill is, here's a picture of Sylvia. She was super stressed about her bills. She was getting all these letters. And another lady is really skilled at understanding the legalities of bills. She's very bright, very good at English. So she went round and she read Sylvia's letters for her. She wrote replies and she helped sort her paperwork out. Again, to the lady it was no big deal, but to Sylvia it was massive. This lady was sharing her talent, her skill of English, of her ability to read complex documents. So when we think about being generous, there might be something that you're really good at that maybe your sibling isn't. You might be really good at maths, and like for me, I've struggled so much with maths. But one of my best friends was really good and they really helped me. Even now doing this project, I really struggle with the spreadsheet of getting all of the information in a spreadsheet. I was writing it all out by hand. One of my friends said, just send me all the information. I'm really good at spreadsheets. I can do that for you. It might be that you're good at a sport and one of your friends isn't. You might be able to help them get better at that. It's the generosity with what we're good at. Just giving that skill room, giving it to someone else, being generous with it. And then finally, actual gifts. I think often when people think of generosity, they think of gifts, money, things. And of course this is part of it, and I've seen this too. Part of our project, we called it From Hearts to Homes. And one of the things was that a lot of my friends and a lot of people who weren't local, they really wanted to be generous to this project. They really wanted to help people, but they weren't here. They're not in the local community. So they couldn't phone people because they didn't know them. They couldn't shop for them, again, because they didn't know them. But what they could do was they wanted to give some money. So we started up, if you see on the screen, a Just Giving account to fundraise, and we called it Buy a Bag. And basically we said, if you give £12, you will have bought someone shopping for the week. And after about, I don't even know, a month, we had raised £1,900, which was beyond my wildest dreams. And this was out of people being generous with their money at a time when, you know, COVID it makes sort of the financial areas of our life slightly uncertain. But people wanted to be able to give this money in order for people less financially able than them to be able to get their shopping. So now for 2 months we've been able to buy the shopping for our community members. If you see here, we've been able to have extra treats. I'm going to show you a picture of Val with her flowers that we could afford because we had this money. And we were able to celebrate different birthdays. So here is a photo of Margaret on her birthday. We surprised her with a cake. And I'm just going to finish off with a little video of Sylvia receiving. She has had such a hard time emotionally. And again, because of this generosity, we were able to get her a nice little cake for her birthday along with her shopping. So as we finish with this video, I just really encourage you to remember that generosity isn't just money. You can be generous with your time. You can be generous with your words. You can be generous with your talents. And of course, you can be generous with what you have, whether it be a little bit of money, a little bit of food, whatever it is. But as we finish with this video, I'd just like us to remember that not only are we asked to be generous, but God is generous with us. And He wants us to have good things. He wants us to know that we have His time. He wants us to hear His kind words towards us. He wants us to know that He wants to increase those talents and those skills. And He wants to give us good gifts.
Look at this lovely cake.
Come on, we love you.
And that was from Reverend.
From?
My
Oh, your neighbour?
oh no, my
Right, give this a puff. See if you can do it.
Yeah.
And don't burn yourself.
All the air in your lungs. You can do it. We believe in you.
I haven't got the
Don't